The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. So this is the first day of the March 2024 session at Mountain Gate. It's the first day, and everybody's commitment to practice is really clear, and the energy is really supportive and deepening, which is really wonderful and inspiring. So thank you everybody for your practice. And before I start today, Roshi asked me to make an announcement because I have been apparently causing people to be a little concerned by saying that I was doing these Dharma talks because Roshi was not feeling well. Sometimes, well, let me just say, she said that she wants everyone to know she's fine. And she's been asking me to give these talks as part of my training during session and other times to give these talks, and also to do the morning Daisan. And so that's why we're doing that. She has intermittently not been feeling well, but that's not the reason that she asked me to do these talks, although it has coincided at times when she needed a break, which is why I said that. But not to worry, she is fine. And anyway, just wanted to say that. So there's a really great book that just came out by Norman Waddell. Let me get the title page open. It is, I'm using the Kindle app, just a minute. Oh no, it keeps disappearing. Okay, it is Hakuin Song of Zazen. It is Mitra-roshi's lectures on Zen practice translated by Norman Waddell. I misspoke when I said it was by Norman Waddell. It was translated by Norman Waddell. And there is a preface or forward by D.T. Suzuki. It's the Kindle app on my computer. It doesn't work very well, so I had to scrunch over to see it. But anyway, it is Mitra-roshi's talk on Hakuin Song of Zazen, his discussions on Zen practice. And so, starting in the third chapter, there's some information about Hakuin's teacher, Shoju Rojin, that I didn't know about, and it was really interesting to learn about, so I thought I'd share some of it here. So his teacher, when he was young, was also really interested in practice. He was raised inside Iyama Castle, the son of, well, it's unclear who he was the son of, but he was the son of somebody who was a lord, and so that's why he was living in the castle. But when he was living at the castle and he turned 13 years of age, a priest visited the castle for a few days to give lectures, and the young boys in the castle each brought a sheet of paper for the priest to write on, and he wrote on these pieces of paper the name of a particular Buddhist deity who the boy was supposed to regard as a tutelary guardian. And so he wrote the inscriptions for them according to their ages, beginning with the oldest. The oldest boy, he said, "You are the Bodhisattva Monju." And then another boy, he said, "You are the Buddha Dainichi." And another one, he said, "You are the Bodhisattva Kokuzo," and so on. And then when Shoju's turn came, this is Hakuin's teacher when he was 13, that priest who was visiting the castle said, well, he studied the boy's face, he studied Shoju's face, and then he said, "Within your own heart, you have the Bodhisattva Kanon, and there is no need for me to write that down for you." The priest's words puzzled and greatly troubled Shoju. He wondered to himself, why am I the only boy who didn't get a name? How can I have a Bodhisattva inside my heart? He pondered over this in springtime as he gazed at the cherry petals scattering in the spring breeze. He became lost in it while listening mindlessly to the patter of the autumn rain. Had that priest lost his senses? Was his mind sound? Was he besotted by a romantic involvement of some kind? I don't know why that was a question. That's what he wondered. And then Shoju goes on wondering in his teenage mind. He says, but even if his actions did make people feel dubious or sad about him or even abandon him, I don't believe he would change. I don't think it would faze him in the least. So he was recognizing that this priest might have had some understanding of some sort, something different. He was seeing things differently. So thoughts like this went through young Shoju's mind. And then in the spring, when he was 16, Shoju and the maids and children of the feudal lord in Iyama Castle were bustling busily about, attending to the needs of an important guest of honor at Iyama Castle. As Shoju was carrying a tray of food up to the guest quarters on the 3rd floor of the castle, he slipped on the stairway and fell, upsetting the tray. At that very instant, he awakened to his self-nature. Oblivious to his fall and the spilled food around him, he burst into peals of laughter. He had seen the Kanon in his own heart. How grateful he was, how happy he felt. He ran to a nearby temple and told the priest what had happened. Unfortunately, the priest was unable to fully comprehend what Shoju was describing to him, but he did suggest a book that might help the young boy. He got out the book Bodhidharma's 6 Gates, a collection of the teachings of Bodhidharma, the founder of the Zen school, and he lent this book to Shoju. On reading it, Shoju felt, everything I experienced and have been trying to say, they are all in these pages. His belief in the Zen path strengthened, and his religious joy deepened. Then at age 19, on accompanying Lord Matsudaira on a trip to Edo, he sought out many of the leading Buddhist teachers in the city. Among those he visited was Zen master Shido Munan, who resided in Tohokuan, a tiny hermitage in the Azabu district. In time, he became Munan's disciple and entered the Buddhist priesthood, receiving from him the religious name Etan. Acting as Munan's attendant for a number of years, he mastered the secrets of his Zen and struck to the root of the great Dharma. However, he had no ambition to remain amid the wealth and comfort of Edo or any large city, and he returned to his native Iyama. There he spent the rest of his life, hidden in a small thatched hermitage in a state of total purity. Shoju Rojin was probably the only person in the entire country who could have tweaked Ikaku's, that's Hakuin's name. Ikaku is Hakuin. So let me say that sentence again so you know who I'm talking about. So Shoju Rojin, who is the Hakuin's teacher, who as a young boy had this awakening we just talked about. And then his name as a teacher, he was referred to as Shoju Rojin. So that's who is being spoken about here. Yamada Mumon in this book is talking about how Shoju Rojin has given everything up just to devote himself purely to the Dharma. He's given up the trappings of wealth and is living in a very simple way. And that's his view on things and how he expresses his Zen in a way. And so Momon is saying that because Shoju has this orientation and this realization, he might be the only one in all of Japan who could have helped Hakuin. And he did that by tweaking his nose. So I'm going to skip to that part of the book. So as we all know, Hakuin, as a young child, was very concerned about hell and very much wanted to find a path to freedom from hell, and saw Buddhism as that path, and had, some interesting turns in his path, but it did eventually wind up practicing very deeply. And he did have an opening and went to go see Shoju to have his opening tested. And in that first meeting, I will read now again from Yamada Mumon-roshi's book, Hakuin's Song of Zazen. It's the 4th chapter, the first paragraph of the 4th chapter. It says, on his first meeting with Shoju Rojin, Eikaku, or Hakuin, reverently handed him a sheet of paper in which he had written a verse setting forth his experience. And he said, "I ask that you overlook my lack of manners," he said, "but this is what I have succeeded in grasping." And then Shoju snatched the paper and crumpled it imperiously in his left hand, at the same time thrusting his right fist into Eikaku's face. He said, "This is something you cooked up in your head. Show me what you grasped down in your belly." He barked with a fierce glare at... he barked with a fierce glare in his eye. But Eikaku was not about to concede so easily. He said, "If my Satori were such a mean and miserable thing, I'd puke it up like this." And then he said, without an instant's hesitation, Shoju thrust back, "How do you see Chaochu's Mu?" And then Hakuin said, "No way to get a grip on Mu." Hakuin countered with what he thought was a fine riposte, but Shoju was faster. He, with his large hand, gnarled and knotted like a hard lump of pine resin and clay, grabbed the bridge of Eikaku's nose and just wrenched it mercilessly. And he said, "I got a good grip on it, didn't I?" And then started laughing like crazy. So that was their first meeting. That was what Hakuin encountered when he went to do his intensive training, his intensive Zen training. I can't say many of us would have a similar experience these days going to a Zen teacher. A Zen teacher is not going to reach out and cause bodily harm, hopefully. Hopefully they're not going to be doing that. But many of us can feel that this is what it feels like to go sometimes when we're hanging on to something and the teacher sees that there's a place where we can let go and see something deeper and more free. It can feel very threatening to let go of that thing, whatever it is that we're hanging on to. So this interaction is fairly extreme by today's standards, for sure. But the dynamic itself is similar. It needs to be similar because, well, it doesn't want to be abusive by any means, but it needs to be similar in that the teacher will help us see where we're caught. And that can be a very, very painful, unsettling experience. So there's a lot to that particular aspect of things, and I don't want to scare anybody. But it's just something that can happen as we go in our practice, that we get to a place where we've let go of the easy stuff. There's usually kind of easy stuff to let go of at the beginning, and it can feel really wonderful, and that's sort of the honeymoon phase of practice. And then we get to the part of practice that's really, really, really hard, because we get to the deeper level stuff that we've been hanging on to since early childhood, that our whole identity is wrapped up in and really perpetuating. And so to let go of those things that we're hanging on to can feel like we're dying. It can feel very threatening if somebody is pointing it out, even just pointing it out one way or the other, either through directly saying something or an interaction that points out that place of being caught. And there's a really excellent little excerpt from Thupten Chodron I'd like to read. She's a Tibetan nun who's been practicing for a long time, I believe. Her book, this is from her book, Finding Our Way. This is an excerpt that Mitra-roshi had written down a while ago, so I'm not sure where it is in the book, Thupten Chodron's, but it is in her book, Finding Our Way. And so this is the quote from Thupten Chodron. "I thought that my Dharma practice was developing well, because when I lived in India, I didn't get angry very much. After some time, my teacher sent me to live at a Dharma center in Italy, where I was the only American nun among a group of macho Italian monks. You can imagine the conflicts we had. But I couldn't figure out why I was having problems, because I thought my patience had matured. Every evening, I would study Chapter 6 of Shantideva's text, Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life, which dealt with patience. And every day, I would again get mad at the people around me. Although I knew the words of Shantideva's text well and thought I was practicing them properly, my mind continued to blame others for all the conflicts and problems. She says, "It took me a long time to figure out what practicing patience meant, and I am still working on it. Whenever people live together, there are conflicts, simply because people see things in different ways. When I lived in the nunnery in France, I handled my anger by sitting on my meditation cushion and contemplating patience. I never thought to approach the other person and say, 'Hey, the way the situation appears to me is like this. How do you see it?' And to listen and discuss openly what had happened. I thought that since the cause of suffering was in my own mind, only meditation would solve the problem." Now, this is true, because the only problems we have are in our own mind. And there's absolutely no circumstance ever that can cause suffering we don't cause ourselves. Ultimately, no matter what happens, there is this place of freedom that we can open to that is very real, that is unmoved by circumstance. So searching for that place through meditation does bring freedom in interpersonal relationships through that way. It's certainly helpful. The practice she's talking about is certainly helpful, though, in relationships with people, because we can, have that conversation. It can be very fruitful, but not everybody is open to that. Some people aren't able to have an open conversation like that. So that's why it's so important to deepen so much in our own practice that no matter what happens, we're okay. There is a story that illustrates how going deeply within can open that space for a difficult interaction to be healed in many ways. Mitra-roshi once was working near the monastery wall with some other monks when a homeless person who was fairly threatening came up and was aggressive with Mitra-roshi, and he just focused and was present. And I know Mitra-roshi has given this a description of this interaction before, but just recalling it now, it is a really excellent description of how you can meet difficulty, interpersonal difficulty, with true inner peace. Because as this homeless person who was aggressive with Mitra-roshi, was just sort of talking wildly, being fairly aggressive, accusing the monks of stealing their water, the homeless encampment's water. Mitra-roshi just stayed grounded and focused, and became increasingly focused as he listened to this man, and was very honoring, I'm sure, by doing that. And then over time, this monk, or this homeless man, just sort of calmed down and let the whole thing go and just walked away. So that's one way that just simply doing a sort of one-sided approach to the situation can really help a lot. So the deeper we can go, the further we can go in our practice and find that place of clarity no matter what, then things around us can smooth out quite a bit, and we can bring a lot of healing and help to the world just by doing that. But Thupten continues. She says, "Well, I was convinced that my version of the story was the one that was the right one, and if I just did one of the mental juggling acts that Shantideva taught relative to practicing patience, the anger would go away. But all my mental juggling acts were intellectual machinations and didn't touch my anger." So she's bringing up here another really important point. We can't really think our way to the truth. We can't think our way to freedom. We can't think our way around anger or fear. These really strong primal emotions, especially as we go deeper in practice, really deep stuff that we have going on within, we can't think our way through it. We can only sense our way through it, open to it as much as we can when it comes up. Opening up to the bodily sensations, that sense of energy as it comes up, will help free those patterns as we go deeper and deeper into our practice. And then Thupten continues. She says, "Years later, I attended a workshop on communication skills and conflict resolution. It became clear that when I was angry, I could do other things besides withdrawing from the situation and meditation. Of course, we have to look at our mind and develop patience, but we can also discuss the problem with the other person. We can share how we feel in a situation without blaming the other person for our feelings. I began to understand that I had to make more effort to communicate and that I could learn a lot by opening up and discussing things with other people. This can sometimes be scary, and I still find it difficult to go to a person and say, "There's a problem here, let's talk about it." However, I see that developing good communication skills and meditation on patience and compassion go hand in hand. If I approach the other person, deeply listen to them, and understand his or her experience, my anger automatically dissipates and compassion arises. So here she is again, the 10 children, just really beautifully describing the long maturation. So just like Hakuin did after his opening, at whatever level, you always want to continue to go deeper and deeper into it. And as you do that, you live that understanding in your daily life as much as possible. That's the long maturation. And as you go more deeply into practicing what you're understanding on the cushion, your practice on the cushion goes deeper too, because there's letting go happening in daily life, letting go happening on the cushion, and they each contribute to your overall deepening. I think it's probably impossible to have a truly deep opening if you're not doing the long maturation, because you can't live your life hanging on to things, then go to the cushion and just let go as you let go on the cushion, and then you go back and then you act in a way that's full of attachment. You're never really going to go that deep. There can always be letting go in the midst of any circumstance, so don't get me wrong there. No matter what, you can always go deeper on the cushion, but you're never going to have a really deep opening if you don't also work on this long maturation work that Thupten Chodron is describing well. And that is what Hakuin did throughout his life. His first opening, when he scribbled something on a paper and handed it to his teacher as his answer to a koan, that would produce a lot of laughter, I would imagine, with any teacher worth their salt, a student coming in and doing that, because it demonstrates not very deep understanding. So Hakuin got that feedback in that first interaction with Shoju Rojin, and continued to deepen in his life, and ultimately said, practice in action is worth 10,000 times that of practice on the cushion, because of the power of letting go in the moment, in our interactions with others, as we go about our daily lives. Feeding into the practice on the cushion feeding into that practice in action. And so one of the best ways we can do that is through interpersonal relationships. It's probably one of the most fraught areas of life, one of the things that's hardest for anybody in the long maturation, because so many people have their own view of a certain situation. There's this movie called Rashomon where, I haven't seen it, but there's basically 4 scenes, and it's 4 different retellings of the same thing, because the people who saw this one incident all had totally different views of it, even though they saw the same thing. And so this happens to us in daily life all the time. We're interacting with somebody and it's almost like 2 cartoon strips that are parallel to each other. There's not really a lot of communication going on. They're just sort of happening in parallel. And so anytime we can stop and sort of see where we're coming from, how we might have a skewed view of the situation, and then try to put ourselves in the shoes of somebody else. I imagine Mitra-roshi might have been doing that in some way with the homeless man who was aggressive with him. By being so grounded and clear, he was able to recognize where that homeless person was coming from, who was being so aggressive, and experience empathy and express it, I'm sure, with his energy. And we can do that ourselves too. Hopefully we won't be encountering aggressive people like that. But anytime there's a misunderstanding or a miscommunication, it's often, well, sometimes there just is straight miscommunication, but often when there's difficulty between people, it's because each person is operating with their own their own coloring on the situation based on their own experiences growing up. And so the more that we can be clear within ourselves and be open to possibility, open to what the other person might be going through, then that can help bridge that gap so that the two cartoon strips, maybe they can talk to each other a little bit and have that connection. And so just being open to somebody else is a beautiful expression of our practice, even when it seems like the other person could be aggressive or wrong. We think the other person is just wrong. Being open to where we might be caught or where we might be perceiving things in a skewed way can go a long way towards healing that. And it's really an expression of the paramita of not killing. So the practice of one of the precepts is not killing. So when we hold on to an idea of another person as being a certain way, in a way what we're doing is killing that person's potential for growth. If we have an idea of them and we hold on to it and we don't give space for change. But in each interaction, if we're able to stay grounded and open to whatever the other person might be going through, open to any growth they might be having, then we can support them wherever they're at. And that's a beautiful way to practice in daily life. Because when we don't hold on to ideas about ourselves or other people, then we allow everybody to grow in the way that is best for them in that moment. It's a way to give life, not just to ourselves, but to other people, and all people really, because we are all one. So just coming to an interaction with the state of mind that gives life to all beings is a beautiful way to practice in daily life. And one of the ways we can practice our koans in daily life is that if we assume people or things are a certain way, this way or that way, then we'll never see things or people as they really are. And so being as clear as possible, as compassionate as possible in every interaction with the person in our daily life is a way to open to true mind, is a way to open to who we really are. So it's just as much a part of our practice on the cushion, our deep Zen practice, our koan practice, to work in this way in our daily life. And the fruits of this type of work are incredible freedom. Incredible freedom comes from it. There's a story of a monk in China who, this was when there were a lot of invaders in China, and enemy soldiers were scouring the countryside looking for people to get rid of if they were resisting. And a group of soldiers raided the monk Buko's temple, and they were intending to put all the monks there to death, as they had elsewhere in the country. But Buko remained calm in the face of the attack and asked the leader of the soldiers to allow time to compose a poem to mark the occasion of his death. And while the soldiers waited with drawn swords, Buko took up his calligraphy brush and wrote, "In all this world there is no place for me to lay down my staff. Subject and object are totally empty. How delightful! The great sword of a famous warrior of the past, it is as if a spring breeze were split by a bolt of lightning." So I'll read that last line again. Subject and object are totally empty. How delightful! The great sword of a famous warrior of the past, it is as if a spring breeze were split by a bolt of lightning. So I hope this was helpful in some way. I find this orientation to practice very inspiring and helpful, both on the cushion and off. And I wonder if anybody has any questions or comments. Okay, well, thank you for listening. We'll stop now and recite the four vows.